which we will be announcing very shortly who the winners are. Our friends at Black Rapid, who are actually just down the street here, and made very, very cool straps for cameras as well as other things. Three-legged thing. They come from Stagston, England, and they make tripods, and some lucky people are making some. And then Alien Skid Software, who we see a lot here on Creative Live, amazing products, and a lot of our professional. Thanks to those guys. Again, follow them on Twitter, Facebook, all those things. Next, we want to thank the Ruins as well as Paris Carrasco, who was the beautiful muralist whose paintings we were allowed to see, allowed to use, allowed to be the backdrop of the pieces of work that Natalie created yesterday. Beautiful, beautiful murals. And of course, the Ruins, where we spent a full day doing all of those things yesterday. Shout out and thank you to our Creative Live audience out there all over the globe. We heard from Africa today and Mexico giving us comments and feedback. You're the reason we are here at Creative Live. You're the reason that we continue to be able to put on events where we see Miss Anela and her team, Natalie, working right in front of us, doing what they do. And so thank you to our audience. Thank you for your engagement during our live events as well. Next, we have the Creative Live crew. I'm blown away every time we have a workshop and we have new people that come here to our studios and say that they haven't seen people who are so amicable and so helpful and really work together as a team in the production world as we do here at Creative Live, and it's always an honor to hear that. People here just work together cohesively to get the finest product out there, to make these workshops a pleasant experience for whether it's our studio audience, our instructors, all of that. So special shout out to the crew who was on location yesterday. Willie, I think his call time was 5 a.m., our technical director. So great, big shout out to all of you who make this possible. Our studio audience, we had 10 of you today coming from Canada to the East Coast and all over. It's always a pleasure to have folks in what we call our front row here who are able to interact with us, bring to life everybody who is out there watching online. So thank you for being here. I want to thank our beautiful models, Tori and Taylor. They truly, I can't wait to see what the final pieces are that you create, Natalie, with each of them. So very special shout out. And then, of course, the rest of the team that worked to put together yesterday's masterpiece, Leonid Gurvich, who is currently on a plane heading back to the East Coast, Zoe Boyson, a beautiful, beautiful hair, and Nakoma, who is one of our regular makeup inheritors here at Creative Live. We love you dearly. So it was wonderful to hear from all of them and hear how they interact and work with folks like Natalie. Next, we want to thank Matt, the left brain side of Miss Daniela, Natalie's partner in life and in business. Again, amazing to see the two of you working together, not just on screen yesterday, but behind the scenes. And what a wonderful support that you offer each other, and how you work together to create what you create. There was a question I didn't ask you in the last segment, but was, where can I get a mat? Where can I get a mat of my own? As you talk through your progression. And so we thank Matt as well for being here with us. And finally, these workshops certainly don't happen without our artists and educators who take what they know and turn it around to teach the world, not to hold in for themselves. You don't just do your art, but you are now enabling thousands and thousands and thousands people to have you be a bit of their inspiration of all those things that we started talking about on the first day. And that is such an incredible gift. I know through talking to Leela how much work, and you, how much work Natalie has put into putting this course together. And I think it's funny to hear you guys say, oh, it's a lot more work than we really thought at first. because it is. It is a lot of content, and it's genuine and it's real, and that's authentic. And you've been an amazing person to work with, and I'm now honored to call you. So please help me welcome. Used to saying that. Thank Miss Anela, Natalie. We are now going to announce our contest winners. Photo contest winner. We had a number of wonderful entries on our Facebook page, which is where that contest took place. And we are going to tell you who those 3 winners are. So the 3rd place winner is going to win a Black Rapid Sport Camera Strap, a Think Tank Photo City Walker 20 camera bag, and this is a great prize. And the winner is Adrian Farr. Can you tell us a little bit about, congratulations, Adrian, a little bit about what you love about this image?
I think amongst all the entries, it's one that really stood out in terms of colour explosion in the picture. I really felt like, as well, the hairstyling in the image, the way that was brought together, everything in the image with the 2 models as well, which is, posing 2 models isn't always easy, so I thought that came across really well in the final composition chosen, so yeah, that just stood out to me.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations, Adrian. Next, we have the 2nd place winner, Alien Skin Software Photo Bundle, plus a Think Tank Photo Retrospective 7 camera bag, and this is a $463 prize. And the winner is Jessica Drake with an amazing image. Tell us what drew you to this one.
Well, there were really good entries in terms of the styling and everything that's going on in the fashion element of the pictures that we saw in the entries we got. But this one stood out in terms of the way there's a transformation element going on between the surreal and animalistic part of it. So that kind of stood out to me, and I felt as if that was something really good amongst all the entries. And
Awesome. Congratulations to Jessica. And now it's time. Can we get a drum roll, please? Our 1st place winner is winning a 3-legged thing Brine tripod, as well as a Think Tank Retrospective 30 camera bag. This is a $650 prize. And the winner is Laura Cope. Tell us about why you chose this one as the grand prize winner.
Well, we were hesitant to give this one first place because Matthew suggested actually just stealing the image and pretending it's ours. So that's how we were, how impressed we were with it. We just we think it's really great mix of showing fashion modelling and element, but having this really great surreal aspect coming from it as well. We think it really works well compositionally, colour-wise. It's this explosion of colour, but in terms of the imaginative element, I think it really fits. It goes right up there, and this just stood out. When I first saw it, I was just really amazed by the detail in it, as well as the concept going on with the so yeah, that really stood out to both Matthew and I.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Congratulations again to our winners. Thank you to everybody who entered this contest. And of course, thank you to Think Tank, to 3-Legged Thing, to Alien Skin, and Black Rapid for the prizes. All right, well, with that, it is time to head into our last segment of the day. We're going to be talking about social media as well as your dream jobs, being ready for your dream jobs. So, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Okay, so this is the end of my workshop. I want to naturally talk about these aspects of branding and marketing, but I think there are lots of untraditional ways that we market ourselves these days, so it relates a lot to social media. So I want to go straight into first talking about branding and marketing and how I interpret these words in line with typical kind of ways that we brand and market our photography today through the tools that we have. So this word branding, I've been mentioning how Miss Anela is more of a brand these days, more of a business than just myself as a solitary artist. That term, that name still applies to me, but it's also a brand name. I've showed here like a montage of different ways in which I put across my brand in terms of using my logo, red and black, and particular font that I've chosen and the way that I present that, and that's something that I keep consistent across everything that I put out there. So we've got my websites on there, we have my newsletter, we have my business card, the invoice headers and model release headers, and all of these things I keep my branding consistent across. So in terms of thinking of how being a photographer is like any other business, it's that same element of consistency, and that becomes a professional consistency. So no matter how small your business is, you are waving that flag of reassurance that you basically are providing a particular service, and you want people to know you for that. And that, I think, is quite interesting as an artist, because the potential there to be creative with your branding is quite interesting. It's not so much a dull and boring thing. You can be creative with the way you represent your name and the way you represent yourself in like the logo design that you choose, and that's an exciting part of branding yourself as a creative. So not one to be necessarily scared of, but to be embraced. So marketing. So I've just mentioned briefly about branding. What about marketing? So marketing is important for any business. So whether you're a photographer, obviously, or any other profession, marketing is all about getting the word about you out there. When we go back to when I was talking about passion, sometimes it's interesting how when I said about not letting passion make you forget the line between art and business. You might be very passionate about creating things, and that's great, but it doesn't lead to automatic recognition in the outside world. You have to work to getting noticed and recognised. So it's not like you just get this automatic recognition because of how passionate you are. You have to put it out there. You know how to put yourself out there and how to kind of market yourself to these different genres you might be trying to get into. As a photographer, you are the brand. So in talking about the branding and the image of the logo, you're the brand, so you and your reputation and what it's going to be basically remembered by the clients that you work with. But the marketing takes on a more mysterious form. So there's less necessarily conventional ways of advertising yourself. There's less conventional advertising or a less conventional way in at all. So a good example, or just a very plain example there to tell would be you wouldn't necessarily advertise yourself in the same way that another business might. I think we've paid for advertising once, and it was a real waste of money. When I say paid for advertising, I mean like paid for advertising in the way that a business would, in terms of putting yourself on a website and paying for that advert, and that was just, I don't really think that was very successful. I think that was a waste of money. So you are putting yourself out there in a way that isn't necessarily the same way that a local business would put themselves out there. But then again, it depends on what kind of photographer you are. Because if you're a photographer that's just opened up a studio in town and you want to attract people in the local area, and putting an advert in a local magazine is obviously going to be more appropriate. But for most of us, it's about just being globally relevant and putting our work out through the internet. Like most business needs time to build, because the best advertising is reputation. So this applies to being a photographer. It also applies to basically any kind of business, even from a restaurant through to what we do creatively with our images. It's about, like I was saying earlier about the ad agency, have their favourite photographer who they use because they use him time and time again, and so they know that he's going to fulfil, they feel safe with him, they feel like the clients are going to be pleased when they see the results he brings them. Social media is a free and organic form of self-promotion, and also social media is a form of marketing that a lot of business is using, not just the creative industries, but any industry. It's a very interesting phenomenon, the way in which we're kind of putting ourselves out there in a way that's like for free at first, and then we're trying to find ways to monetize the audience that we build. It's very interesting to see how people are doing that in different ways. So for example, there's this fashion page on Facebook that I've been following lately, and they've been amassing a lot of followers, I've got like 4 million followers. And now they're bringing out a magazine and putting advertising into it. So I can see that their model has been that first we want to collect all these people, attract them with our fashion pictures, and then we'll start making money out of them. So that's very interesting for me to see, for anyone to see how they are using something free as the kind of enticing thing to bring people in and to get ultimately an audience for free. So when I was putting my work out there, I was kind of inadvertently doing that, amassing an audience that I could later kind of sell things to in different ways, but I wasn't entirely sure I was doing that at first. It was very much a subconscious thing at first, and I was making clothes on portraits and sharing them. So social media, Facebook, Twitter, Google+, Flickr, Pinterest, 500 hits. We all know of these sites, and some are bigger at one time than others. I think at the moment Facebook and Twitter are very big. Pinterest is something that's kind of coming in. Flickr used to be, I think it's still fairly popular, but it used to be a lot more of the place to post your pictures. You've got new ones coming up all the time. So my beginnings are really from Flickr. I think I've mentioned this numerous times through the course of my workshop, how my background informs what I do now. I just want to go back a little bit into the past and talk about how I started out making the virtual into the physical. So I've already mentioned how I've been sharing my work online, seeing my work build up like this tapestry in my sets, in my Flickr sets, seeing how that was becoming a particular style, getting the feedback from people as to what they thought of my work, knowing that there was an audience there with interest in my work. I mentioned the other day about someone making a gallery comment that kind of planted a seed in my mind to think, where could I go with my work? So basically, I was sharing my work online back in 2006, and through a few months of sharing my work, I started to achieve this attention from people who, which basically led to my first local exhibition. So I was living in Brighton at the time, and the exhibition was with a gallery called North End Photography. And the first time I got that email asking me to exhibit all the self-portraiture that I'd been doing for the last year or so, it was very, very exciting, because it was the first time that anyone could recognise something in my work and ask me to actually do something physical with it. So it was very much about virtual going into physical, making prints of my pictures for the first time, not really having a clue how the artwork works, but just kind of like putting it all out there. And this newspaper clipping is typical also of the publicity that I was starting to get. And this also led to more exhibitions. The next exhibition was one in Madrid that I was really pleased about, because this meant it was going even further than just one exhibition. It was very fascinating for me. I just felt like I was on this the beginning of a strange journey. I wasn't knowing where I was going. So what was happening is that a story was being shaped about the way I was sharing my work, and it became the part of the way that my work was being understood was social media. The way that I was sharing it became part of the story. So here's a picture of me on the cover of American Photo back in 2009, digital Pro Photo Masters edition as well. So you can see here the word Flickr, Master of Flickr, one of 12 Flickr superstars. So the social media was part of the story angle that came to characterise my work and get me noticed. I'm not necessarily saying that's a good or bad thing, it's just what was happening, and I found it very exciting. But I also was wondering where it was going to go as well, because I was aware of the way in which I was being represented was interesting, that I was not just being represented as an artist, but part of like a wave of some kind of use of social media, more like a news angle, if you like. So I was really proud of these features. Don't get me wrong, I found it fascinating how my work was becoming something real in the real world. You know, people were talking about it. A lot of these works that I created very kind of organically. I use this word to describe situations where you just let it flow and you don't necessarily have this intent that you're going for. So a lot of these images were celebrated in that light, this whole self-portraitist thing. So that's great. But also, I was starting to wonder where it was going, because I knew that I didn't know where my self-portraiture was going to lead, and so I was wondering the way in which these articles were making sense of me. Is that to my advantage, or is that just to their advantage for their particular news angle? What does it mean for my longevity in my career? So it kind of, in terms of milestones, I mentioned earlier about milestones. This was one of, I consider to be my self-portraiture milestone, is a publication of my first book entitled Self-Portrait Photography. And when Ilex in the UK first approached me and asked me to write a book, I thought, what is this strange email that's come in? And didn't really realise at the time how big it would be, because it basically meant that this gone all over the world and been translated into multiple languages, and I still now have versions in Chinese sent to me, and it's very fascinating. This was a great milestone for me to put everything, all of my journey into this one piece of work, this book that was full of my work and talking about my journey and my Flickr story and everything like that. And also in that book, what I also enjoyed, as a kind of side note, is that I had a contributor section. And this was because they wanted to, bulk the book out, because I'm a new author, they don't want to, they're taking a bit of a risk, they want to fill it with something that's other people are going to enjoy as well. But I also really liked the opportunity to show contributors, because it meant I could talk about other people's work, because I knew that it wasn't just all about my work that was important, it was also about the wave of self-portraiture that was happening around me. So there was eight or seven other contributors in this book, whose work I talk about, and I invite them to kind of submit their images and pay them as well. So that was really exciting for me to curate that section and to be responsible for curating that book. And that was something that stuck out for me as a highlight of that particular experience. But then also I brought my second book out. Now, the interesting point and the real point I want to make about these books, I'm not just trying to sell them to you, even though it might just look like that, but in my meeting for self-portrait photography, when I was signing the contract for it, even though I was really excited about the book and everything, the thing that excited me more than anything else was the fact that they asked me if I would write another book, potentially. They said to me, maybe you could come back and do a book on portraiture next time. At that time, I had no portraits of anyone else. I just had other self-portraits. But I thought to myself, wow, they actually trust me to write another book on portraiture, and that meant so much to me because it meant that I was being appreciated for more than just that angle of the Flickr and self-portraiture stuff that gave me this pedestal, but I wanted to do something next on that pedestal, and I didn't want to be this kind of, this self-portrait sensation that would later then be forgotten. I wanted to take it somewhere somewhere meaningful, not just self-portraiture itself. So then when it came to doing this book, which came out a year later, and by then I'd produced a lot of images in the first fashion shoot experiences that we're doing, and also other things where I was collaborating with some of the images that we saw the other day, using these improvised locations to start doing fashion collaborations. So all of these images became part of my second book, which was turning the camera away from me and looking at other people, but also with a continuation of self-portraits that I'd done since the first book. So that for me was a great milestone in terms of saying to me, okay, these are the milestones, this is where I'm going, I'm moving on and evolving from that initial burst of publicity that I was very fortunate to have. For my self-portraiture, but really I wanted it to go somewhere else as well. So your audience on social media, who are your clients? Art collectors, so you're a fine artist, you're looking for people who are going to buy your work. When I first started sharing my work online, and when I went on to the exhibitions that I showed you there, and that was great because people were starting to buy my work, but I thought, okay, well, let's put a link online for people to buy my work, and I was disappointed to find that not many people were buying it, and that's because most people that are following me are other photographers, so other photographers aren't necessarily going to be buying your work because they're doing work of their own. So my predominant audience were people that want to learn from me for their own career, not necessarily buy my work for their walls. Agencies and companies, so are you trying to approach people who actually want you to promote their product? If so, then are they going to be on your are they going to be following you on social media? Or is it necessary that you withdraw yourself from social media a little bit to actually look outside the boundaries of it? Magazine editors, directors, writers, publishers, all these different kinds of people that you might want to be reaching out to actually publish or license your work or commission you to do something for them. Are you going to find them through social media or not? And also other photographers. So I've just mentioned how most of my audience, especially at the start, being other photographers. What does that mean in terms of if you're trying to sell something to them? This is great for our fashion show experience because we find a lot of other photographers are following me and they're interested in coming along on one of our shoots and shooting on it. So other photographers, that's a big audience online that may or may not be useful for what they're trying to sell. So popularity on social media. Some photographers have a big following and plenty work, have a big following and little work, have a small following and plenty work. I think it's very important not to get too bogged down with numbers of followers, because I mentioned the other day that I came across Annie Leibowitz's page on Twitter. She's got like thousands and thousands of followers, and she hasn't written yet one tweet. So that just shows how, she's obviously not devoting her time to social media. She's got bigger fish to fry, what have you. So it all comes down to how you use your social media as a tool. Quality over quantity. Using the followers that you do have in the way that suits what you are doing and how you are interacting with them. So it's not all about getting obsessed with numbers, because once you start doing that, you lose the meaning of that audience and how they actually play a role in your art making. I admit I fall victim to the tendency of wanting to put a picture out there and not necessarily properly, like sometimes rushing to that point of wanting to put it out there rather than give myself time to breathe and think, okay, remembering why I've made the picture and why it's important to me, just kind of recollecting myself and thinking, okay, well, it's not just about my audience and getting the numbers up, it's about me and what satisfies me, and also people outside of social media who this picture might benefit in terms of getting commercial work. It comes down to what you do with social media, and it comes down to what kind of audience you want to reach. We've got, Ken has been kind to mention our Fashion Show Experience group a few times, which we just have on Facebook dedicated to people who are interested in it. I find that group is so much, that it is even more valuable than my Facebook page, where I've got 50,000 people following me on Facebook. But my group is so much more useful for promoting my event, because that has collected people who are specifically interested in my event. So instead of just kind of posting it to 50,000 people who may or may not be interested in it, this dedicated group is invaluable for people who are particularly interested in it. And that's a reason also why you might decide to have an email newsletter instead of just social media, because email newsletter, if someone's inclined to follow your newsletter, they're inclined to be more interested in what you do and potentially buy what you're offering, whether that's workshop places or fine art prints or products or whatever. So social media is essentially a tool that you can use. Using it, it's not just about achieving the numbers, it's about how you're using it to put your work out there and interact and make use of it. Who is your audience, or who do you want your audience to be? If you want work, what kind of work? Popularity on social media may not give you exactly what you want, but it's a stepping stone. The reason I say this is because you might have a certain number of followers, and you might find you never able to sell anything to those followers necessarily if you're getting to a point where you want to make a living from what you do, but you find that your number of followers on Facebook or Twitter or whatever become a tool for something else. So an example here is that you might put your number of followers into your credentials when you're approaching, for example, a sponsor. And that sponsor sees how many followers you have on whatever, and then they think, okay, that's great, that's a potential outlet for us to promote our whatever through you. So that becomes a tool. It's not always something that directly leads to what you want. Flickr, going back to my own evolution journey, Flickr is kind of like part of the tangle of my journey. I wouldn't say necessarily that I could have done everything I did without it, nor is it entirely responsible for my successes, if you like, because it was a tool that I used. I found it funny when they described me as a master of Flickr or 12, one of 12 Flickr superstars, because Flickr is just a portal, it's just somewhere you put your pictures. It doesn't create the pictures for you. But at the same time, it's a community that helped draw the work out of me, and also it became a place for people to see my work. It was through Flickr that I got noticed by somebody at Microsoft who approached me to come and talk about my work at their Pro Photo Summit back in 2008. And that was the picture I showed you earlier, the 3 red clones. That was that first trip to America where I was invited over to talk about my work. And that was a really great opportunity that basically stemmed from social media. Because of being on Flickr, it somehow led to that person seeing my work, etc., etc. So it was a stepping stone. So I wanted to talk here about something I kind of recognise in the way that we are these days, in the way that we function, in the way that times have changed. Old school hard work ethic versus modern day fast track ethic. And what I mean by this is that you've got these unconventional, non-traditional ways of getting into photography these days because of social media and because of the way in which information is going so much quicker around the world and we can get things out there so much quicker. I certainly am, I wouldn't be doing photography without the internet and without the whole digital revolution of photography in terms of digital cameras and Photoshop. But there are upsides and downsides to each of these. So I've kind of done this little comparison. So the old school way you might consider to be, for example, going to college and studying for a number of years, studying photography, and then kind of making your emergence into the commercial world, into the real world. So you've got this institutionalization versus being independent with this whole fast track thing. So you basically don't go to college necessarily, and you just kind of make your own way in photography, which is how I did it, and how I've always encouraged other people to do it, in terms of not necessarily needing a degree or such like. A degree is a tool. It's a tool that you have to use. It doesn't give you anything, like it gives you experience, it gives you knowledge, but you have to use them. So you can't. I remember the shock of when I was little and learning for the first time that when you go to university you don't automatically get a job at the end. I actually thought that's what happens. You're guaranteed this profession that emerges at the end of it. And when I first learned that, actually, no, you're on your own to go out there and find a job, I thought, whoa. I don't know how old I was at the time, very young. So that's the way I got into photography. And there are downsides and upsides to that. I recommend this whole just go and do it thing. But also it's important to remember that if you are self-taught, that you have to basically find opportunities to teach yourself and not discourage yourself from learning as you would do if you were arguably studying and having the time to go into things in depth. So you've got master your craft versus just do it as life is short. So old school is about this kind of stereotype of studying something for many years before you come out and do it versus just doing it and learning on the job. So in terms of which camp you feel you might fall into more than one than the other, question to ask yourself in terms of where you are on that spectrum. What would your work be like if you had to make a complete living or double your income if you're already in photography from your photography right now? So as opposed, this is for the question for people who are perhaps studying photography or come out and studying photography and are not making a living from it yet but want to, and it's a question posed to help you think about what your work would be like if you had to suddenly become very productive, versus the second question, which is what would your work be like if you had time to study in depth or work intricately. So the reason I'm posing these two questions is that if you're somebody who uses social media a lot, saturates yourself in the online world, hasn't studied photography, is very self-taught, versus somebody who maybe has studied for 3 years to study English and media, but I didn't study photography itself. That's something that emerged on the side. Just to let you know that, because I didn't know at that time that I wanted to go into photography. It was more like a general creative direction. But if I had years to actually look at photography in particular, would that have changed the way that I put my work out there? Or would it have done the opposite in a bad way? Would it have made it slower for me to make work? Would it have decreased my productivity? If I had that question posed to me how would I go out and make a living from it? Does that increase my productivity to a point that is healthier? It's about this balance between the two, and it's interesting just to ask yourself those questions. In the same vein, I've mentioned already a few times this commission I did last year, where I was working on it the year before actually, but this is a piece that I did that was very different from what I was used to doing. This is a commission piece that was hung in Kai Mayfair restaurant in London, and it was commissioned especially for the space, and it involved months and months of work on one picture, which I really wasn't used to, because as I've already been talking about with my workflow, I spend normally a day or two max on one particular picture that I then release generally through social media first, not all the time, but most of the time, and then I move on to the next and the next. But this involved like working on 20 pictures at once, and it was very strange for me to have to discipline myself to keep working on this one piece. But what I found really interesting about this whole experience was how it drew something out of me that was of a different caliber and level of quality in terms of the demands that it had in order to be that size, and the level of intricacy that is involved in this piece. I don't show any details of this image now, but there's a video of this piece that I made to share online, where you can see all the close-up of the many, many details I put into this image, because this is not an image made for the internet, whereas most of my work generally does look good on the internet, if you like, because it's eye-catching at the small size. This is an image that's made for large-scale viewing, so it was hard for me to get my head around, okay, I'm not working on something for the internet, I'm working on something big. I've also got to think about the quality demands of working on something that is going to be printed and hung. And I was, so I wanted to share it online in a way that was creative. That's why I made this video, which you can go and check out if you want to see the detail in the picture. But this video helped share it to my internet audience in a way that was going to appeal to them, because otherwise they wouldn't get it if they saw this tiny detail and didn't really know how to see it closer. And on a side note, I was particularly pleased also about this because it meant that my work was going into a different kind of context. It wasn't just about going on the internet and then maybe something happens to it in the future. It was being commissioned especially for a space, and I was really proud of that prestige that came from having my work hung in what's essentially kind of like a public place where people were going to see it physically. So again, going from virtual into physical, as with the Flickr story earlier, but this time in a different way, in the way of an art commission. That was very thrilling for me. It was part of my journey. So social media culture, in terms of what I've described as this fast track kind of tendency of us to want to get out there sooner rather than later, and not necessarily sit and learn everything, but to learn on the job. To just be aware of seeking fans before you've anything to be fans of. So this thing about passion, it's great to be passionate. That's how I got into photography, purely based on passion, curiosity, no professional intention or goal. I didn't sit down and think about it as a business. And that's great, but then also you have to remember that, like I was saying before, you want to make something, you've got to prove to the world that you've got this passion. You have to make something physical, because that's how they view you. They don't just look at you and see the talent pouring out of you. They see your work. So you need to constantly be harnessing your energy and your passion into that work so people can see how you're so passionate. So remember that when you're putting yourself out there and you're marketing yourself, you're marketing your work. You're not just marketing your work, yourself through your work, but you're also making sense of your work as to how it belongs to the world and in its genre specification. So what I'm saying is, you might have made loads of pictures, but you might not know how to sell them to the world, how to organise them on a website. So kind of give yourself time to make sense of yourself before you then seek the fans, because the fans and the followers, the people who press like on Facebook, you want them to like what you're about. You don't just want them to you don't want to amass this just mysteriously big number just out of thin air just for the sake of it. Seeking of popularity hampering your creativity and sincerity. So a little bit like the last point, but as you go on making work, and I've described about that thrill of getting the likes and seeing what's popular, what's in trend, and just also remembering to go back and think, what do I want to do? What do I want to do to this piece that might kind of hamper its ultimate popularity online and give it something that, you know, is a little quirkier or idiosyncratic for me. So just consider how, you know, if you're seeking popularity when you're marketing your work through social media, how can you retain you, your personality, your creativity, and the way you're sincere about it as well. And, you know, it's a balance, you know, getting followers online. You might do a piece of work that's more popular than another, and that piece of popular work draws in fans that are then going to see your next quirky work. So it's all about a little bit of one and the other, and there's no perfect balance you're going to get between the two, and it's just something to be aware of. Photography and teaching don't have to go hand in hand. Think about the purpose. I've basically constructed this whole workshop, and especially the things I'm saying in this section, the last section, I've constructed it around what would I want someone to have told me when I was starting out. All of these points are things that I'm not just kind of throwing at you, they're things that I've asked myself that I kind of almost wish I could tell an earlier version of me. So when I started out in photography, I guess I kind of fell straight into this whole notion that if you're creating images, you kind of also want to show the world how you do them as well. How and why do you do these pictures? Maybe it was a bit early before I was really figuring out what I want to do with my work. I feel confident in doing this creative live workshop because I feel like I've got these things to say. But if it came along any earlier, would I really know how to teach other people, how to help other people with their career, rather than just getting on and finding my style and finding my feet in photography? So this point I put here because I see young photographers who are starting out in photography and they're making blog posts about how they've made their pictures. They're kind of putting it all out there, and sometimes you don't. That's great. I mean, if that's where your heart is, but don't forget to understand that photography and teaching are two separate things. They do go well together, but they don't always have to go hand in hand. You can spend time and withdraw yourself from that crowd and work on what you do without having to question it, without having to show other people how you do it. You can do that, and there's no shame in that. That's you being a photographer. And if you want to teach that, that's something that you can slowly start moving your work into, or do bits and pieces of it. They don't just gel together straight away, and that's something that I've learned for myself over the years. Whereas at first I think they were very much glued together. I thought they were kind of part and parcel of each other. So I'm talking about social media and how you might have loads. I'm not sure exactly why this picture is relevant to this point. I guess it was almost like the catch-22, like laughing at you with this picture. But I've been talking about how social media is irrelevant to different degrees as to how you get out there and find work. Well, so how do you market yourself to get work? So the catch-22, no one will commission you until you've already done some commissions. Like I was saying in my very first segment, I was talking about how it's a funny game of the art industry or creative industry full stop. You know, there's this very funny way of working, and I discover more about it as I go on, and I debate this whole idea of style versus reputation, which is more important, and how I put the balance. Well, there is this element of the chase. This picture here, which is actually entitled The Chase, is very much like that. Matthew and I had a period of, I think it was last year or the end of the year before, where we spent about 6 months just kind of pitching Miss Anela's brand as a website. I think it was shortly after I redesigned our website, so we were putting ourselves out there. Matthew was getting more into this role of being a kind of, I guess, a business/marketing person as part of our partnership. So I was, you know, getting him on the phone, kind of ringing agencies, ringing all these different potential clients, mostly agencies that might be interested in my work. And it's very, very useful to have these periods of time where you're marketing yourself. I'm not saying that it's something you shouldn't do, but ironically enough, when we stopped doing that, we just kind of found that we weren't getting very many replies during this burst of marketing. So when we stopped and just kind of took a rest from it, we found that a few weeks later work started to come in after we'd stopped chasing it, which was very odd because it was almost like when you chase people, you kind of put them off a little bit. Not necessarily putting them off you for life, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get work from it, because usually what happens when someone wants you to do a job for them. They look for you, and you have to put yourself in a place where you're going to be noticed. But if you're kind of looking desperate and groveling around and emailing people all the time, you don't always get a good turnover of responses to it. Also, like I was saying earlier about the meetings with the art dealer and the ad agency, there's this sense that because you're putting yourself in front of them, they think they're in the place to critique your work rather than accept you for who you might just be. And so there is that tendency for them to do that because you're approaching them. Whereas if they were in a situation where they're going to approach you, then there wouldn't be any question about your style. They would say, yeah, you're the one for the job because the client wants you. So there is this problematic, this contradiction about chasing work and not getting it, turning around and it comes to you. And I'm not saying that it's an easy one to counter because you have to put yourself out there to a point where you are being seen, but then you have to kind of almost look a bit unattainable, like you're not quite that easy to get. You have to almost want them to want you more by not putting yourself out there too easily. And this might come from doing your fine art work, for example. I'm just trying to give a physical example of how you might be doing this. You might put your fine art out there. And fine art, the good thing about fine art is it's this industry where you have artists kind of doing what they want, and kind of being on their own little pedestal, no matter what the world thinks of that work. So that's interesting because then commercial clients will be coming along and see this work that such and such does and thinks, okay, that'd be interesting for our job that we've got coming up. But then on the flip side of fine art is that your work might just end up being so esoteric, so niche, that no one thinks it's relevant to the commercial world, which I've come up against time and time again with my work. Like meetings I've had with art agencies, and they can't see how my work is relevant to the commercial world, even though I can see it, but they can't because I didn't at the time have enough commercial work in my portfolio to prove to them that what I do can be applied to the real world. So fine art has this, it's like a double-edged sword. It's something that you can use to show off your style. There's also something that can put people off because it's too quirky or it's not relevant to this apparently more simplistic world of commercial imagery. The world of commercial work is like a moving carousel. You need to get yourself up to speed to get on it. It won't stop for you. You need to have momentum already. And I tried to pick the right words to describe this analogy because it really does feel like in order to attract these clients that you want, especially in fashion and commercial spheres, you have to run alongside them. You can't just kind of wait for it to stop and say, okay, you're letting me on, giving me a chance, because they don't want to stop. They don't want to kind of take the risk of taking on a photographer who has no commercial work in their books that no one has recommended to them, because it's a risk for them and they don't want to let their clients down. Or if it's a client, if it's an actual client themselves, they haven't seen examples, so they don't want to risk letting their audience down, their potential customers down. So it's tricky. You have to look as if you're already doing what you want to do. And this is this catch-22. How do you do that? Ultimately, you want to be able to just go out and create the work you want to get hired to do, which just isn't easy. You have to find a way in which to accommodate those desires that you have. I was talking about the pitch and making the pictures that you want to put into that pitch. You have to go and make those pictures or something that resembles what you want to be doing for people. So when I was getting a bit frustrated in the past with how my self-portraiture was relating to the commercial world, well, it was largely because most of my work was self-portraiture, and if I wanted to do commercial work, I had to actually show some examples of things that were closer to the nature of that, and not just loads of pictures of myself, which was fine because that's what my heart was in at the time, and I was following my heart. And for me, fortunately, lots of opportunities came from that. But I guess I was frustrated with wanting to really get to migrate into commercial work quicker than I was. And it wasn't easy with the self-portraiture because people liked it and oohed and hard over it, but they just were a bit like stumped as to how to make use of me for their own commercial needs, So, like I say about style, when we talk about style, it's about what people are trying to get from us, how our work is commodified for them. It's not just about us doing what we like and people thinking, oh, that's great, come and do a job for me. It's about how does it serve my brand or my purpose, because we're all doing business at the end of the day, or at least everyone outside of your artistry is doing business. So in that same line there, I want to move on to the topic about working for free. This is something I definitely wanted to address somewhere in my workshop when it comes to this whole argument of whether one should work for free. Sometimes I'm tempted to write very blunt statements like don't work for free, but then I feel like when I actually think about that statement, I'm put off writing it because it isn't a black and white statement. It depends on the definition of free and the definition of work. You know, not everything is for free. Sometimes you don't get rewarded in money, but you get rewarded in something else that serves your career. Work as well. What does work mean? Because if someone's asking you to do something, you might consider that more work than if you go and do something yourself as a form of collaboration that is technically work, but it's something you're doing of your own instinct. So all my self-portraiture you could consider, work, but it's stuff that I produced that I did in a way where I didn't feel like I was doing like a profession or a job. I was doing making images that I just love to create. It can be exploitation from a client with a budget. So when I feel like saying don't work for free, it's because of all those situations where there is a client that is basically trying to exploit a photographer who should be paid in a given situation. So I've written their client with a budget. So a great example, an example I've written about before is in my early days in my self-portraiture, and I was still in that kind of like teething period where I wasn't quite knowing where I was going with my work, whether it was professional and serious or whatever. And I was putting my clone images out there, and I got approached by a shopping centre that wanted to use one of my pictures as part of a Christmas campaign on the side of buses and bus shelters. And they, in their initial email, they said the photographer's credit usually people are happy with. And kind of remembering that I was young and, like I say, not much experience, I thought, it sounds exciting, but they're not offering any money, is that right? So I asked my friend, and he said, this client probably got like £3,000 and they're trying to pocket it for themselves basically by using your work for free on the basis that you want some exposure naturally as a young and passionate photographer. So I basically said no to the client and said, look, I'm a professional, I'd like £500. Obviously I gave just a figure that was a lot lower than they probably had, but I just said, okay, I'll call it that as a compromise, and they said, no, we're going to look down another avenue for this particular thing. So I knew that they probably found someone else who did it for free. So for me, that was exploitation, a good example of it, because this client obviously has a marketing exercise they want to do that year for Christmas, and they were choosing a photographer that they would get the images from for free, and I don't think it was right. And it also can be exploitation by a magazine wanting publishing for free, but it depends on the dynamic. This again, it comes down to who wants what at a certain time. So I got an email a couple of weeks ago from a magazine in the Middle East who spent about 2 or 3 paragraphs telling me how great this magazine is, how big, how important they are. And then they said, can we use your picture on the cover? We don't have a budget to pay you. So I kind of thought it was a bit contradictory. You're telling me how great you are and how many great advertisers you've got in your magazine. I went to have a look at it, and they've got these advertisements from the company. So clearly to me it was a profit-making business that wanted to use my work for free, and I didn't feel like it was right because of the particular way in which they emphasised how important they were in that country. So I said no. We said no, and that we expect payment for usage of my pictures. But then in other situations, it might be that you don't mind a magazine using your pictures for free because it's a form of exposure. It might be a magazine that's more independent, that you don't consider to have a big budget, even though there is usually always a budget involved to some degree. In that case, it seems very cut and dry that they should pay you something because they do clearly have that functioning marketing department. In other cases, though, for example, you might be having an exhibition, and when it comes to advertising, like by going back to the traditional ways of advertising, the way you would pay to have an advert, if you have a product and you want to sell it, you pay to have an advert in a magazine. So in the same way, if you're getting featured in a magazine, it's like a form of free advert. So you also have to think of the potential of that. So if you're having an exhibition and you decide, I need to advertise an exhibition, and you could pay to put an advert in a magazine. I mean, or you could say to the magazine, look, do a feature on me and mention my exhibition, and in return you're getting this, material to publish in your magazine. So in that case, it's the photographer who needs the publicity for their exhibition. So it's almost like it depends on the situation. You can't just say never publish your work for free, because there might be a situation where you're actually essentially getting free advertising for something that you really want to advertise, especially at a particular time, like if you're having a show on certain dates. So it does depend on the dynamic, and ultimately it's case by case. And it might not always be that you feel 100% happy all of the time, but it's a case of just doing what you feel is right, whether you really want to be in a particular magazine. And when it comes to clients like a shopping centre approaching you, that's ultimately down to you. But just remember that whenever you do something for free in a situation like that, you're essentially you're affecting the whole industry, because someone else could have been paid for that job that you've done for free. And that's why it's important to think of this, even if you are a hobbyist or amateur, because those people have images online that people do hunt out and ask to use, and if you don't ask for payment, then they're essentially being able to use you for free, and it does, over time, en masse, undermine the value of the photography industry. So it's just something to keep in mind as to when to ask for something as compensation. I have learned a lot by being on the other side of the coin in hiring other people. So through the last few years, I've been hiring other people, lots of roles, styling, makeup, hair, and I have people who email me wanting to assist, for example, and then when I see them in action, then I think of a certain person later on, that I might think, oh yeah, I want to hire that person again, because they've already proved to me that they can do such and such, that they're reliable. And they've done that to me on a voluntary basis, because they've come along and volunteered to assist me. So sometimes it is necessary to kind of demonstrate what you can do. And this comes down to essentially doing unpaid work. But in return, you're getting the opportunity to showcase yourself to get paid work later on. I just want to mention how some of my early opportunities were great tools, and sometimes it is hard to distinguish an exploitation. So, for example, I talked about the Christmas shopping centre thing, but there's also opportunities that I've already mentioned, like being approached by Microsoft to come and do a talk at the Photo Summit in 2008. This was an opportunity where they paid for my expenses. They paid for Matthew as well to come with me and to be flown over and for me to do this talk, and put me up and looked after everything. There was no fee that came with it, so you could technically call it unpaid work, because I'm spending my time talking for a company. But what that led to, that opportunity led to, was invaluable, because I enjoyed the experience, first of all. Going to America for the first time, obviously it was a big deal. But then to be put in front of this kind of sea of faceless photography contacts, that some of which I didn't even realise were in the audience until later on in my career. When I first Skyped with Creative Live, it took me a few minutes to realise that the head of talent, George Varanakis, had seen me at the Photo Summit those years ago. He was in the audience watching me there, and that was a pleasant surprise, because it's come around years later. Also, sponsors I've had in the past few years have been derived from that exposure I got from doing that. And it also just led to great experience for me as well, and gave me that confidence boost in consolidating who I was and where I'm going. So how do I distinguish that from the Christmas shopping centre thing? There's no easy rules about it. You have to look at it and think, is this company or is this person treating me at least respectfully? What can I get out of it? Where might it lead to? And am I being kind of at least compensated for my time in a way that, that I'm not going to be completely out of pocket from this opportunity? Rewards are not always in cash, especially for a team that is growing together. It's going back to people who are starting out in fashion photography, and I was saying how I prefer usually to pay people even just a little bit of money for their time, because then it kind of means that they're not out of pocket, at least covers their expenses, a bit of money for their time. When they've done hairstyling for me on small collaboration shoots on modelling, that means that I can just get on with my images and not worry too much that people are waiting every second to get their images. But if you are collaborating together or paying small amounts of money or what have you, this this idea of mutual collaborations is really useful for when you are just learning about other people and developing your team. When a job offer comes in, so the keywords brief and budget. The brief I've already mentioned is the description of the job basically that a client is asking you to do. So it can be any amount of information, small or short or long. You want as much information as you want about that. The budget as well. So the keywords you're going to ask when you get somebody who is offering you some kind of compensation for a proper job rather than a free opportunity, you want to ask someone for their budget. So if you're unsure whether someone's actually offering you any money for something they're asking you to do, you want to just ask them, what's your budget? That is a polite way of saying, how much are you going to pay? Not just for me, but also for everything you might need for me to complete this job, the team and materials. And the brief and the budget are relative to each other. So if you've given a massive budget, that's great, but what do you have to do for that budget? What do they expect you to do? Always be suspicious when no brief is given, because one will appear later down the line. This is really important. Honestly, I still sometimes get that naive little thrill when someone says, oh, we don't really have a full brief, we want your creativity. But then I have to check myself and think, actually, no, I want a brief, because you are going to want later you're going to probably complain later about something I've done in a way that you didn't expect. So sometimes clients aren't very good with their words and articulating and describing and visualizing. And it's your job as a photographer to sometimes pull that from them if they're not giving you a proper brief. What do they want? What kind of models do they want? How do they want it to look? What kind of clothes do they want them to be wearing? The budget needs a careful breakdown for their benefit and yours. So you also need to think about how you're going to spend the budget. This comes down to the pitching as well that I was talking about the other day, describing how you're going to make everything happen. Come to expect that generally expectations are bigger than the budgets. That's just like this running joke in the arts and entertainment industry, so that's something you've got to bear in mind. Don't be afraid to ask for more money in proposing a particular concept or location, etc. Offer options. You're ultimately the producer. Like I say, clients don't always have big enough imaginations to know exactly how something can be executed, and you want to make sure that you're giving them options to be able to play with. And it doesn't matter if they say no, you're offering it on the table. It shows that you're alert and you're thinking about how to make their brief come to life. You want to be able to call upon people and tools that you've used before, and other value to doing self-funded sheets, prepare sheets. So exercise, imagining your dream job offer. So there's a little bit I want to get through before the end of this segment. I just want to make sure I cover it all. So this is an exercise where I basically want people at home to follow along with this and to think about imagining a dream job offer. It's a great exercise for putting into practice a lot of things I'm talking about. Imagine you wake up tomorrow to find an email in your inbox. The email is for your dream job. What would the brief be? What would the budget be? Who would it be for? What would it entail and how would you feel? All of these questions, you're imagining actually getting that email. So in the real world, when you get that email, like the typical situation, a job needs to be organised ASAP, timescales tight, client expects you to produce everything. Where would you start? Who would you call upon to style, to assist? Which models or agencies can you trust? What locations do you know of? So when this email comes in for something that you might dream of doing, you have to make it come into reality, literally in hours and days and months. Hours and days and weeks. You have to actually put this into practicality. So a lot of the time you need to be able to call upon things you've already used or you already know of. So I want to just read out some dream job offers that I've had from my students here. I asked them to think of their dream job, and I want to basically just read through some of them and just as a little bit of intrigue, and also give some of my thoughts on them. So I asked them to think about their dream job if they had this email in their inbox. So I have this from Dallas. My dream job offer would be to be approached by a company preparing to launch a small collection of new fragrances. The job would require me to work with the brand's art director and pull together an amazing creative team. So like I'm saying about pulling together an amazing creative team, you want to ideally already know members of that amazing creative team that you want to pull together. So the preparation for that dream job is something that is already underway with everything you do now. Sam Breach. You have been selected to come up with a series of story-driven creative portraits for our client Lord, who plans to hang the 6 images as family heirlooms in the hallway of her recently purchased castle residence in the wilds of Ireland. The commission is initially for a series of 6 art pieces with a total budget of $600,000 and 6 months until completion. Lord will trust you with full creative control and vision over the direction the series takes. So, as well as for entertainment purposes, I included this one because I just wanted, definitely ask the Lord what he wants you to do with that $600,000 and also get a brief from him as well. But thank you. And also from Hayley, it's hard to pinpoint what my dream job would be. There's a vibrancy in life to photography that appeals to me and it's addictive. Photography drives me creatively like nothing else can. Currently, I'm attempting to start up a fashion magazine in my hometown, which is what I want most in a career. I aspire to run my own fashion magazine, along with good writers and a strong emphasis on fashion and photography. I feel like this would mesh well with my main interests: writing, photography, fashion, and graphic design. And the reason I put that one is I thought it was interesting how you're focusing in on skills that you're already kind of thinking of and harnessing, and how they might be used in your career and how they're being used already. And I thought that was really interesting. Building a dream team for your dream job starts now. Just like you've seen our team at play yesterday and the stuff we've done together through our time together, that is a dream team for our dream job that we're actually doing when I get home to the UK. We're doing pretty much a dream job with Leonid, and that's the preparation we put into that has paid off. So that pitch I was talking about, the way in which you're putting this PDF, this hypothetical PDF of all your work and how all your current work is relevant to how you're working towards a dream job now. These are the images that you're going to be putting together to the clients that come to you. Are you ready to show them something of what you're about, something of where you want to be? I want to read out now some things that I've written myself. How did they get that? That kind of tendency we have to wonder how other people get certain jobs. Everyone has their own unique cocktail of opportunities. Everything, a degree, our number of Facebook followers, a friend at a model agency, a job itself, is a tool to the next thing, and from each one the next. Some threads stopping, others spinning forward and upwards, all shaping and making that unique web that we call life. Behind every business, every potential client, sponsor, agency, there are human beings, just like the wizard behind the curtain. Some you'll connect with, some not. Some will love your work, others not. See the connection when you see it, which can lead to one thing, then another, and then maybe one day your dream job. Except it will no longer be a dream, because by then you can drop that word. It's not a dream anymore, it's a reality. It's an email in your inbox, and you're already on the phone booking the location that you know will work perfectly for it. Now, I want to move on to this analogy, because I was mentioning there the wizard behind the curtain. I want to give this analogy. I want to fit this in before the end of this segment. The Wizard of Oz. Matthew and I were on a walk a couple of weeks ago, and we came upon this analogy in the middle of this rainy Cold War, the usual daily routine. And we thought of the Wizard of Oz, this great analogy for your journey. Dorothy is you on the journey, on the yellow brick road. The Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion are your styling team. So basically, they're the people you call upon, they're the people that you're building this rapport with, this reputation with each other, this trust with each other, and they're on the journey with you. Toto is your assistant, of course. The ruby slippers are your camera. That was Matthew's input on that one. So that's basically your magic tool. This was, okay, I will credit Matthew to building out this analogy mostly. Wicked Witch represents rejection, bad experience, the things that make us feel as if we want to turn back and not progress on our journey. God Witch is encouragement and good experience, ultimately what drives us, what gives us that praise and encouragement, motivation. Oz is your dream job, so Oz is where you're headed. And when you get there, the wizard behind this curtain is realizing that people behind every big or dream job are human after all. Now, I've got some more text from this. So ultimately, you want the journey. The journey is important. The journey is fundamental to how you behave when you get to the dream job. When you get to Oz, you don't want a helicopter to Oz. That's what people want. They want a fast track a lot of the time. They want to just fly there. They want to get to the top. But without the journey and the team, there is no experience and there is no story. This is a journey. There's no elevator to success. You have to take the stairs. There's no elevator because without the ladder, what is at the top doesn't exist. Success is the top rung of your own ladder. So your journey is actually makes the whole meaning of your success. To wish for the success is futile because there's nothing up there, there's nothing below you, there's nothing that makes it worthwhile to be at that level because it's someone else's dream, it's not your dream. Your dream is what you build when you're going through your own growth. The journey is a picture, one of my very first pictures I created with a car. The journey is your life, that's your life. The journey is endless, it keeps going and you keep building and evolving, and that isn't to be embraced. It's not just something that comes to get out of the way in terms of getting to that mythical dream job in the way in which we dream about that concept. So what I'm doing now is an evolution of what I've built over all of that time. I couldn't be doing the things I do now without the experience. I couldn't be shooting in the way that I shoot now without the experience I've had of the self-portraiture and the early fashion photos that I was putting together and collaborating with. This idea of success being a straight line, is a myth. This is what success looks like. It's this wheeling squiggle that basically is a form of making mistakes, going backwards and forwards, going in different directions, being mischanneled, and it's all a journey of discovery that helps us shape who we are. So that same squiggle becomes that evolution. You don't want to be a meteoric rise, you want to be a slow organic growth because that's how you figure out what you want to be. That's how you also tick the happiness box as well as the success box. The dream job is something that is this mythical thing because the job that is ready for you is not a dream anymore. It's a job that you're ready for, and like I say, you're already sorting out on the phone to organise the team and the location and everything else, all the other ingredients you need for what is essentially, if you were looking back years and forward, it would be a dream job, and you're there, and it doesn't no longer feel like a myth. Success in whose eyes? What you want to do versus what you think you want to do. Defining success as well as achieving it is a lifelong journey. It's not about just knowing, I want to be such and such and I'm going to succeed, because you find that your goals actually change and become adapted whilst trying to achieve them. That's something I found interesting and difficult in that, sometimes I might think I want to be a fashion photographer, but I find I don't so much want to be just that. I want to be this, more like this. So that's the squiggle, and that is the self-discovery that goes through that journey as you're going, literally, like Dorothy on the yellow brick road to Oz, that final destination, and how you behave when you get there is ultimately about having that team and that experience by your side. Some of my most rewarding moments. Money, being valued, art and business are things that come together for me in a way that's very pleasurable. It's not about one versus the other or doing photography just for art's sake, just for money. I love to find creative ways to actually engage with people and have my abilities valued through people commissioning me to do things or buying my work. It gives me a great buzz. It means that they are rewarding what I do with the money they've earned from what they do in their life. Money is that currency of appreciation in that sense. Longevity, I was talking earlier about the creative portraiture book and how that to me was really a great milestone because of how it was a continuation of the self-portraiture that I did, and then that I was on a road to something that was coming next and next. Control to create our fantasy. Matthew and I doing the fashion show experience and making something that we dreamed of come alive because no one else was doing it, and we wanted to make it happen for ourselves, and we got a lot of fun out of that, and still do, and continue to do on a bigger level. Trust. Being trusted to create the art commission for the Kai Mayfair restaurant, the Kai Face I produced for that. Being trusted to have someone buy my art and display it in their home. Being trusted with the positions of status in fine art and fashion and commercial work, and having people that believe in me. Prestige as well, that comes as a result of having someone hand my work in their restaurant, and the appreciation for me that from me that comes from opportunities like that. That's something we all like when it comes to having our visual artistry out there in the real world. And making opportunities for others. Having Leonid on this Creative Live workshop has been great because we've given him an opportunity. We paid him to take part in an opportunity that benefits both himself and us as a team. And as part of that, we grow together towards opportunities, further things that we and Leonid can do together and make happen. All the people that come on our shoot experience, that's, to be honest, I'm starting to love the social aspect just as much as the photography, because it's just such a great energy to be around people, like-minded people, creative, and who love just making photography in this particular lens of fashion, but just being together and sharing ideas and just being in a place that is and has that commonality. I love that. I love that more and more, and I'm finding that basically photography is my life, because it is my social life as well as my kind of private own artistic catharsis. So overall, my lessons: follow the strange pull of what you really love, the passion, but also equally value experience and learning. Be inspired by more than one source, internalize them, respond, and enjoy that release, like I was saying, time and time again. There'll be times to do it yourself and times to depend on others. Find things that you want to do yourself, like your strengths, the art making, whatever it is, whether it's fashion or fine art. And then also there are times when you want other people to come and do styling, do the hairstyling, do the set design, help make your vision come to life. Don't let your past hold you back. Let the future draw you forward. So on my last slide, your photography at any time is always a map to where you're going next. I'm really proud of the work that I create and that I've created, that I present to you during this workshop. But for me, it's just a map to where I'm going next. It's just simply, it's almost like a sketch of what's to come. There's so much more I want to do. I'm so excited about going to new levels with my work, and I love the journey. And the more I've realised it is a journey, the more I can embrace that. It's in being imperfectly human that perfect art is created. Evolution is endless, so enjoy the journey.
Natalie, that was an awesome way to end this. That was such a good note to go out on. That idea of evolution is endless, enjoying the journey, and actually going towards giving us a goal, giving us a way to figure out where we're going and where we want to be, and then we need to enjoy it.
Thank you.
I want to share some thoughts that other folks were saying online. We have Trina Yarrington, who says, "I thank you, Natalie, for sharing your creative spirit. I'm so inspired by what you've taught and shown these past 3 days. You've inspired me to try things I never could have imagined." Beautiful. Maria McCorkle says, "Natalie, your work is inspiring, creative, beautiful, and borders on delightfully decadent. So many layers of detail in your art, as is your teaching style. Many layers, finely tuned, with colorful words and explanations that hold the viewer breathless, waiting for the next step in anticipation for the finished product."
Wow, what language. That's amazing.
I think it's so beautiful. If you've been with us for this entire workshop, you know that Maria's comment is true. And the way that she explains how it's true, your writing is time and repetition and course correcting on your journey to be able to continue on with that journey, because it doesn't end. I love that you just said that sometimes you'll be doing it yourself and sometimes you'll be relying on other people to do it for you. Depend on others. I love that. This is something that you can depend on. You can't always depend on Natalie if